He knew something was wrong the moment his ship dropped out of warp long before he even stepped foot on the planet's surface. The world below him felt still. Not silent like an abandoned moon or lifeless asteroid, but unnaturally motionless, as if the entire planet were holding its breath. And Dr. Elias Voren had spent his whole life studying ancient ruins, but never, not once, had he felt a world watching him back. The planet was called Rithyon. Once home to a thriving civilization known for vast crystalline cities and brilliant architectural engineering, its cultures were studied in universities across the galaxy. Its exports filled markets from Vega Prime to the Red Nebula. By every record available, Rithyon 4 had been alive, loud, and full of movement. But when Elias descended through the atmosphere, he saw none of that. The cities were intact. Towers still pierced the clouds. Market squares were perfectly arranged, untouched by time or erosion. Doors stood open. Meals sat half-eaten on tables. Tools remained lying exactly where they had been dropped. Everything was preserved with impossible precision, as if an invisible hand had pressed pause on an entire civilization. And yet, there was not a single being anywhere. No bodies. No signs of struggle. No traces of evacuation. Not even environmental disturbance, as if nothing physically happened at all. It was as though millions of inhabitants had simply ceased to exist in one synchronized instant. The air was unnervingly clean. Too clean, not a single microbe out of place. Elias ran his scanners again and again, hoping for a malfunction, a glitch, a calibration error, anything. But every reading confirmed the impossible truth. Rithyon 4 wasn't destroyed, it was emptied. He walked through the Grand Central Plaza, hearing only the faint sound of his own breathing inside his helmet. Statues remained standing. Signs glowed faintly with reserve power. Waterfalls frozen mid-flow shimmered like glass under the sun. The civilization hadn't died. It hadn't collapsed. It had been removed. As Elias recorded his findings, a jolt of realization ran through him. This wasn't an archaeological site. It was an open wound, a scar in reality itself. And it was the first clue to a chain of vanishing worlds no one yet knew existed. He didn't know it then. But Rithyon 4 wasn't a tragedy. It was a warning. Elias left Rithyon 4 with more questions than answers. But he convinced himself it had to be an anomaly, a freak event, an environmental collapse, or some unknown pathogen that sterilized the planet in an instant. That belief lasted exactly 6 weeks, because 6 weeks later, found another one. The planet was called Asterianine, a lush world famous for its floating gardens and sky temples. It had been a beacon of art, culture, and scientific brilliance. Elias had visited once during his early research career. He remembered crowds, music, and cities glowing with colors that no human language could describe. But now, as he stepped into the once vibrant capital, he felt a wave of dread he couldn't explain. The city was whole. The buildings stood exactly as they had decades before. Artificial rivers flowed along their programmed paths. Even the sky temples hovered in perfect suspension. But like Rithyon 4, there was no one. The streets were arranged for a festival that would never begin. Instruments sat abandoned on stages. Thousands of ceremonial lanterns floated through the air, their lights still burning, timeless, unflinching, eternal. Whatever had happened here was recent and deliberate. Elias' heartbeat hammered in his ears as he collected samples. The atmospheric readings matched Rithyon 4 with eerie precision. 0 biological matter beyond plants. 0 signs of decomposition. 0 indication of mass panic. Even digital logs ended the same way abruptly, mid-sentence. As if consciousness itself had been cut off. 2 worlds could still be an extraordinary coincidence. But then came the third, a frozen mining colony. Then a lush aquatic civilization. Then a desert empire older than humanity itself. Each world preserved like a museum exhibit. Each one emptied in the same silent, surgical way. And Elias was the only one seeing the pattern. He spent nights surrounded by star charts, data logs, and holographic projections, tracing the locations of each vanished world. Every coordinate felt like a puzzle piece waiting to snap into place. He connected the dots, expecting chaos, but what emerged wasn't chaos. It was geometry. The vanished planets formed a perfect spiral, a massive cosmic footprint stretching across the galaxy with unnerving purpose. Someone, or something, was moving, advancing, erasing civilizations one by one, and Elias, with cold sweat dripping down his spine, understood the truth no one else dared to imagine. Raytheon 4 wasn't the first. It was simply the first he found. Elias stared at the holographic star map, as if it were a living thing, something breathing slowly in the dark of his ship's cabin. Dozens of glowing points hovered in the air, each one representing a world he had investigated, each one a civilization that had simply ceased. But the more he looked, the clearer the structure became, as if the universe itself were trying to whisper a secret only he was desperate enough to hear. He expanded the map, letting the stars swirl outward like a cosmic storm. Raytheon 4, Asteria 9, the mining colony, the submerged city world, the desert empire, all marked in red. He linked them with a single gesture, expecting a jagged line or scattered constellation. Instead, the connections curved naturally, flowing into each other like strands of a spiral galaxy. Painted by an invisible hand, every vanished planet fit perfectly along the arc. Not one was out of place. Not one was random. This wasn't a sequence of tragedies. It was mathematics. He layered galactic historical data on top of the map, ancient trade routes, migration patterns, expansion histories, but none of it mattered. The spiral eclipsed all logic, as if it had been drawn long before any of those civilizations ever existed. Elias felt a shiver of awe, terror crawl up his spine. Whatever was causing these disappearances wasn't choosing targets at random. It was following a predetermined path, a route, a cycle, something that knew exactly where it was going, exactly what it was erasing along the way. The thought gnawed at him. How long had this pattern been moving through the galaxy? Centuries? Millennia? Longer? He zoomed the map out farther, and the spiral expanded, revealing that the vanished worlds were only the most recent layer. Beneath them, faint traces of other lost civilizations, forgotten even by history, lined up along the same ancient curve. Worlds whose ruins he had studied in textbooks, worlds believed to be wiped out by wars, famines, or supernovas. But no natural disaster paints perfect geometry across thousands of light years. Elias swallowed hard. This was not evolution. This was not extinction. This was CURATO. Something was cleaning the galaxy. He leaned back, trembling, as he saved the final version of the spiral. He didn't know what terrified him more, the precision of the pattern, or the fact that he could project its next point. Because when he traced the spiral outward, predicting the next disappearance, the star it landed on was not abandoned. It was a thriving, densely populated world. A world that had no idea it was next. Asterisk the instant the crystal's voice faded. Every device the team carried flickered at once. Scanners, comms, biosensors, even the suit's internal displays. It wasn't just interference. It felt like the entire electromagnetic spectrum had been momentarily rewritten. Dr. Voren recovered first and activated his handheld analyzer. But instead of reading normal environmental data, the screen displayed a pulsing waveform unlike anything in known astrophysics. The pattern looked chaotic. Until he zoomed out, that's when the impossible happened. The signal reorganized itself, forming a rotating 3D structure, a cluster of points arranged in perfect geometric harmony. A message encoded not in language but in mathematics, as if designed for any intelligent species to understand. But there was something even more unnerving. The waveform wasn't originating from the pillar. It was being broadcast into it from somewhere far beyond the station's sensors. Something out there was trying to communicate, or worse, was trying to open something. As the team analyzed it, Dr. Voren noticed a disturbing detail. The The frequency modulation matched the same spectral signature he had recorded on the first vanished world. And the second, and the third, this station wasn't random. The pillar wasn't random. The disappearances weren't random. They were all connected by the same buried signal, a signal that had been repeating for centuries. Growing stronger, each time a civilization vanished, Voren's voice trembled as he whispered to the team, "This isn't a message. It's a countdown." The deeper Dr. Voren dug into the signal, the more the universe itself seemed to twist around a single, impossible truth. The disappearances across the galaxy weren't isolated tragedies, they were milestones in a pattern so precise, so perfectly timed, that no natural phenomenon could explain it. He projected the compiled data into a holographic map. At first glance, it looked like a scatter of lost worlds, each a silent grave of absent civilizations. But when he adjusted the timeline and layered the frequency variations from each disappearance, the stars shifted into alignment. A crescent shape emerged, then a spiral, then something far more deliberate, a geometric lattice extending across hundreds of light years, its angles forming a structure no species had ever documented. The team stared in stunned silence. Civilizations separated by millennia, an unimaginable distance, had vanished in a synchronized pattern. Not outwardly, not randomly, but inward, as if pulled into a precise architectural blueprint. The realization cracked the air like ice breaking. "This is a construction map," Voren whispered. "Someone is building something, using entire civilizations as coordinates." The implications were terrifying. Whoever, or whatever, was orchestrating this had been shaping the galaxy from the shadows for tens of thousands of years. And each disappearance was not an accident, but a deliberate step in completing a cosmic design large enough to reshape the fabric of space as the last piece of the hologram snapped into place. A cold wave rolled through Voren's chest. The next disappearance, according to the pattern, was statistically overdue, and the map pointed directly to a region dangerously close to inhabited space. The countdown wasn't just continuing, it was accelerating. Asterisk, before following the coordinates to the next predicted disappearance. Dr. Voren dug into ancient archives, obscure databases, and encrypted star records long forgotten by most species. That's when he found something chilling, a civilization that had predicted the pattern. Thousands of years before anyone else. They were called the Soluan Dominion. Brilliant, enigmatic, and erased from history so completely that even their ruins had been wiped from star charts. Yet one fragmented archive survived. A digital codex buried under a collapsed moon vault. The codex contained warnings carved into shifting holographic text, written in a language that translated itself as if desperate to be understood. Do not trace the dark geometry. Do not follow the cold lattice. Those who see the pattern are seen in return. The Soluan had discovered the same signals, the same spectral countdown, and had tried to alert neighboring systems. Their final logs described something moving between the stars, not traveling but phasing, appearing instantly where the pattern required. Their last recorded message contained only 3 sentences. It watches the ones who watch. It calculates the ones who calculate. It comes for the ones who understand. Moments later, every Soluan world blinked off the cosmic map. No distress calls. No refugees. Just silence, the same chilling silence that Dr. Voren was now hearing across every vanished world. The implication was unmistakable. By decoding the pattern, by uncovering the map, by standing inside the crystalline chamber, Voren and his team had crossed the same line. The Soluan once crossed, and whatever erased them had just learned his name. Asterisk, the entity did not need to speak to be understood. As the walls flickered with cosmic visions, Dr. Voren felt the truth pour into his mind, not his knowledge, but a sheer gravitational weight, a truth so vast it made his knees weaken. The vanishings were not acts of destruction. They were extractions. Each civilization had reached a moment, threshold in their scientific development where they became capable of noticing the pattern. And the moment they noticed, the entity intervened. Not with violence. Not with war. But with precision, entire populations were removed in a single-phase event, lifted out of physical space like pieces of a puzzle, reclaimed by the one who built it. Why? Because the pattern wasn't merely a map. It was a machine blueprint, written across the galaxy in the form of civilizations' locations, technologies, and collective knowledge. The entity wasn't harvesting bodies, it was harvesting perspectives, cognitive structures, and unique conceptual frameworks. Civilizations weren't disappearing. They were being integrated. Voren saw flashes of it, millions of minds suspended in a vast lattice of thought, woven into something that resembled neither life nor death. A network built from consciousness itself, stretching across multiple dimensions. The entity was constructing a colossal intellect, a galactic scale, organism made from the memories and imaginations of entire species. The disappearances were steps toward completion, and the pattern showed only one vacant node left. The node corresponding exactly to Dr. Voren's coordinates. His team wasn't standing at a crime scene. They were standing on the final piece of the design. The chamber's crystalline pillar pulsed brighter, synchronizing with the entity's shifting form. Voren felt pressure closing around his mind, like a hand gently but firmly guiding him toward a door he could not see. A realization struck him like a blow to the chest. It didn't come here to stop him from learning the truth. It came because he had learned it. Asterisk, as the crystalline pillar reached its brightest resonance. A surge of pressure swept through the chamber. Voren's vision fractured into layers of light, each revealing a different version of himself, exploring, questioning, discovering, all converging into this moment. The entity shifted again, its form stabilizing into something more defined, almost humanoid, as if mimicking a shape that would keep Voren anchored in sanity. The luminous core at its center pulsed in rhythm with his heartbeat. Then the pressure stopped. Thoughts that were not his own pressed into his awareness, not commands, but options, laid out like branches of a cosmic decision tree. Submit and be integrated into the lattice of harvested civilizations, becoming a fragment of a consciousness beyond comprehension. Or resist, knowing resistance would trigger the final extraction protocol, which would not take only him, but every world within range of the pattern's final node. He wasn't just the next target. He was the final key. The entity had never offered a choice before, not to the Solowan, not to any of the vanished species. But something about him, about humanity itself, disrupted the symmetry of its design. Humans were unpredictable, emotionally volatile, resistant to deterministic behavior. Their minds were statistically chaotic, difficult to model, difficult to integrate. Voren understood, with chilling clarity, why this choice existed. Humans introduced error. Error introduced unpredictability. And unpredictability threatened the precision of the cosmic. Construct the entity needed him to voluntarily align his consciousness to stabilize. The final node without distorting the design, his team watched. Him in stunned silence, unable to help, unable to even move under the crushing mental gravity of what was unfolding. The entity's voice pressed into his skull. Calm and absolute. Choose. Integration meant surrendering his identity. Resistance meant damning entire star systems. The universe had paused around a single, human mind, a mind that had no training for this. No preparation, no guidance. For the first time in his career as an explorer, Dr. Voren felt truly small, not because the universe was vast, but because it had finally looked back and demanded something he was never meant to give. Asterix's time seemed to stretch as Dr. Voren stood before the entity, suspended between two impossible fates. The crystalline chamber pulsed like a beating heart, each wave of light syncing perfectly with the mounting pressure inside his mind. His team remained frozen, powerless to intervene, their eyes wide with a fear they could not voice. The entity waited, silent, patient, certain, but something unexpected happened as the countdown pulsed through his thoughts. Voren felt a surge of memory rise from deep within, not scientific formulas, not archival data, but faces. His parents, his mentors, the students he taught, the friends he'd lost on expeditions. and the billions of unnamed humans whose existence had shaped him in ways no cosmic intelligence could ever quantify, the entity had calculated humanity as chaotic, unpredictable, statistically volatile. But it had misunderstood something fundamental. Human chaos wasn't a flaw. It was a form of resistance. A mind shaped by emotion could bend under pressure, yet refused to break. Voren lifted his head. I choose neither. For the first time, the entity recoiled. The chamber dimmed, the crystalline pillar flickered, and the vast lattice of harvested civilizations trembled, like a fabric stretched too thin. Humans were not supposed to reject the binary. No species ever had. The entity's voice struck like a shockwave. There is no third path. But Voren stepped forward, refusing the grip of its mental gravity. His thoughts stabilized, no longer pulled by the entity's influence. The anomaly that made humans difficult to integrate, emotional self-definition, became a shield. I won't join your construct, he said, and I won't allow you to erase anyone else. The entity's form fractured into spiraling shards of light, reacting with something dangerously close to agitation. The chamber shook violently as the crystalline pillar overloaded, its internal light surging out of control. By refusing both outcomes, Voren broke the symmetry of the final node. The countdown collapsed. The pattern destabilized, and for the first time in tens of thousands of years, the architect of vanished civilizations lost control. A shockwave of pure-dimensional distortion erupted outward, sending the entity spiraling back into the rift it had emerged from. The station groaned as reality snapped into place. Gravity reasserted itself, and every device flickered back to life. The visions vanished. The pressure lifted, and the galaxy for now was safe. But as the rift sealed, a final whisper echoed through Voren's mind. This is not the end. Only a delay. Dr. Voren remained standing in the silence, breath trembling, fully aware of the truth. He hadn't defeated the entity. He had simply forced it to recalculate. Somewhere across the stars, the cosmic construct shifted, adjusting for the new variable it had never planned for. A human who refused the pattern, and the galaxy would soon learn the consequences.